My name is Noah Ellison. I'm 34 and I run a startup called GreenFront AgTech just outside Eugene. We build integrated systems for regenerative farming, combining soil monitoring sensors with AI-based irrigation control. We're not saving the world, but at least we're trying not to ruin it further. I used to think distance would make it easier. That being 3 states away from my family meant the silence between us would sting less. Turns out Oregon is still too close when the ghosts of your past have your last name. The mornings here start early. Mist clings to the rows of test crops like it's afraid of letting go. I walk the fields every day before the calls and spreadsheets. There's something about soil under your boots that reminds you what's real. My team laughs when I tell them I'd rather fix a leaky hydro valve than attend a VC pitch meeting. Maybe they think I'm just playing the humble founder role. I'm not. I just don't care about boardroom applause. My father never understood that. Charles Ellison, the man who could measure the worth of anything in quarterly dividends. Former banking executive turned investor, still clings to the Wall Street rhythm even after retirement. To him, success is a tailored suit, a polished elevator pitch, and a plaque with your last name in marble. He always hoped I'd follow in his footsteps or at the very least walk parallel. But when I turned down a hedge fund internship after undergrad and instead enrolled in a sustainable agriculture program, something in him cracked. He didn't yell. That would have been too human. He just looked at me like I was a factory defect. I remember the call last week. It started with weather, ended with disappointment. It always does. You're still out there in Eugene, he said, like it was a sentence. Yes, sir, I answered, not bothering to correct the condescension. He sighed. How's your garden with gadgets doing? GreenFront is doing fine, I said. We closed our Series B last month. That's cute, Noah, playing farmer with venture money. Meanwhile, your brother just got promoted to vice president. He's leading international strategy now. In Hong Kong. Of course Mason is. That's what happens when you marry the boss's daughter. I didn't say that out loud. I just let him talk. It's what he likes best. My relationship with Mason is complicated. Always has been. He was the golden boy from the beginning. Varsity athlete, debate team captain, finance degree from Wharton, dad's protege in every sense. I was the kid who asked too many questions, read too many books on soil chemistry, and refused to wear cufflinks. Mom used to be the buffer. Catherine had a way of softening Dad's edges, of pulling me into her garden and reminding me that there's value in quiet things. She passed 6 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, quick, cruel. Since then, the house back in Marin has felt like a museum to the Ellison brand. Polished photos, no laughter. That phone call with Dad didn't last long. They never do. Just enough time for him to remind me that I'd disappointed him in ways too subtle for words. After we hung up, I stared at the call log for a while. Then I put on my boots and headed out to the greenhouse. Nothing cures the echo of failure like the smell of compost and the hiss of misting systems kicking on. Lately, I've been wondering if this distance I built is really distance at all, or just exile. Chosen or not, it still feels like punishment. The sun was coming up over the ridge by the time I reached the west field. The sensors were pinging normal. No alerts. Just rows of kale and microgreens waking up to another day of data and dew. I stood there a while watching, thinking of nothing and everything. Then I turned back toward the office, my father's voice still buzzing in my skull like a trapped flea. It's cute, Noah. A garden with gadgets. I didn't smile. I didn't frown either. I just kept walking. My phone buzzed before I reached the front door. Amanda from First Bank. Again. Her voice sounded rehearsed this time, too calm. Mr. Ellison. I just want to confirm one more time, are you disputing the $75,000 wire transfer made 2 days ago? Yes, I said. I never authorized that. My card was used without my consent. Please flag it as fraud and initiate a reversal. Understood. We've locked the card and escalated it to the fraud department. You might want to speak to the recipient directly if you believe you know them. I already knew. I drove down to Marin that afternoon. No overnight bag, no plan, just keys, a full tank, and 3 hours of slow brewing anger. The house looked the same. Clean lawn, perfect hedges. It always looked like nobody lived there, and maybe that was the point. I walked in without knocking. The door was never locked. Charles was reading in the living room, the Wall Street Journal folded on his lap like a prop. He looked up, not surprised. I didn't expect you. I'm sure you didn't, I said, but I'm here. He didn't ask why. Of course he wouldn't. Clara appeared from the kitchen. She looked startled, then quickly smiled like I'd dropped by for dinner. Noah. What a surprise. You should have told us you were coming. I turned toward her. Mom, did you use my card for Logan's wedding? Her smile faltered. She blinked, then nodded barely. We needed to secure the venue. The Ellington estate was almost fully booked for the year. It was urgent. And you weren't using those funds. I thought it was just sitting there. You thought it was okay to steal from me. Don't say it like that. It's family. You know Logan doesn't have that kind of money, and you've been doing well. What's 75 grand to you now? You didn't ask. You didn't even tell me. You just took it. It's for your brother. He's getting married. It's an investment in his future. And the family's name. Charles stayed silent. He didn't even look up. I walked past them and into the dining room, took out my phone and called Amanda again. She confirmed the freeze was active and that reversal proceedings had begun. I could feel Clara behind me, her voice rising. You're really going to make a scene over this? Yes, I am, because it's mine. You're so ungrateful, after all we've done for you. No, after all you've done to me. She started to cry. Quiet at first, then louder. She called me cold, heartless, said I used to be kind, said I used to understand what family meant. I didn't say anything. I walked out to the front porch, sat on the steps, and let the breeze cool the fire inside me. I was tired of being the good son, the quiet one, the forgiver. Let Mason play the heir. Let Logan get his estate wedding. Let them all keep their illusions, but not with my money. Not anymore. I remember the smell of the principal's office. Polished wood, cheap cologne, nerves thick in the air. I was 16. Logan had just been caught hacking into the grading system. Not smart enough to cover his tracks, not dumb enough to panic. He knew someone would clean it up. Charles arrived in his usual Navy suit. He didn't sit, just stood behind me, one hand on my shoulder. It felt more like a warning than comfort. Principal Hargrove cleared his throat. Mr. Ellison, your son has violated the school's academic integrity code. This is grounds for expulsion. Charles didn't flinch. This is a misunderstanding. My daughter Noah will explain. She was with him. Right? I stared at him. I hadn't even seen Logan that day. I opened my mouth to protest. He squeezed my shoulder. Hard. Noah understands family comes first, he said softly, still smiling at the principal. And we wouldn't want this to tarnish Logan's future, would we? I took the fall, wrote the apology letter, accepted the 2-week suspension, lost the scholarship interview scheduled that same month. When we got home, Clara made my favorite pasta, said how proud she was that I protected my brother. Logan gave me a high five and said I owed him, then forgot it ever happened. I didn't. That lie followed me through college applications. I had to explain the black mark in every interview. Had to justify why I transferred twice, why I never seemed to fit the mold. It wasn't just one moment. It was the start of a pattern. Logan made mistakes. I absorbed the fallout. Charles called it loyalty, Clara called it love. I called it theft. Even years later, I never brought it up. Maybe I thought silence was nobler. Or maybe I thought one day they'd see it, see me. But they never did. That memory clung to me as I sat on their porch watching the sun dip behind the trees. A neighbor's dog barked. Someone's sprinkler kicked on across the street. Inside the house was quiet again. I could picture Clara wiping her tears in the kitchen, Charles still reading his paper untouched. And Logan, somewhere planning his wedding, with my name on the check. I stood up, walked to my car, put my hands on the steering wheel but didn't start the engine, just sat there. 16-year-old me deserved better. 34-year-old me would deliver it. Tomorrow I'd call my lawyer, and this time I wouldn't be the one taking the fall. I didn't sleep much that night. My brain looped old conversations and replayed arguments I never won. The next morning I called my lawyer like I promised myself I would. Then I went to grab groceries. It was the only normal thing I could do. There was a new organic store in downtown Napa, fancy, overpriced, and full of clean white shelves. I turned a corner near the floral section, nearly bumping carts with someone coming the other way. "Sorry," I said reflexively. "Noah." I looked up. Grace Taylor. I hadn't seen her in over a decade. We met in college, roommates for 2 years, best friends for most of it. There was always something unspoken between us. A warmth that hovered near something more but never settled. And then life happened. She stood there holding a bouquet of white peonies, her eyes scanning my face like trying to place a ghost. "Grace," I said, surprised. "Wow, Noah Ellison. I thought that was you." Her voice cracked slightly when she said my name. She looked older, but not by much. Grace had always been elegant in a quiet way, the kind of person who made you feel calm by proximity. Today she looked polished, expensive, and nervous. "You live here now?" I asked, trying to shake off the sudden time warp. "No, just visiting for the week, wedding stuff." "Of course." I waited. She didn't say whose. Then I noticed the ring. "You're marrying Logan?" She nodded, smiled too quickly. "Congratulations," I said too late. "Thanks. Yeah." We stood in silence for a few seconds, too long. Then she cleared her throat. "So what have you been up to?" "Farm tech, right? I read something about your company a while back." "Still farming," I said. "Still teching. Eugene mostly." "That's great, really." I wanted to ask 100 things. Why Logan? When did that start? "Do you remember the night we watched the meteor shower from the roof sophomore year and you almost kissed me?" But I said none of it. Instead, I asked, "So you and Logan, how'd that happen?" Her mouth twitched. She placed the peonies in her cart. "It's kind of complicated. Our parents do business together, a lot of pressure. You know how it is. I do." "You happy?" I asked. She hesitated. That pause said everything. "It's the right thing," she said finally, "for both families. He's good on paper." "You don't have to do it," I said quietly. She looked at me, then really looked. Her eyes were glossy. "You know I can't always choose. Not everyone has your kind of freedom." That stung. Because she was right in some ways, but it also wasn't true. We walked together for a bit more, talked about mutual friends, avoided every topic that mattered. At checkout, she touched my arm. "It was really good to see you, Noah. You too, Grace." She left first. I watched her walk to a black SUV waiting outside. Someone else was driving. That wasn't the Grace I remembered. That wasn't the girl who sang in the quad after midnight or cried during documentaries. But maybe she was still in there. Maybe she was just buried beneath expectation and compromise. I loaded my groceries and sat in my car a while. The air smelled like lavender and lemons from the store. Grace Taylor, my college roommate, my almost something, Logan's bride. This wedding wasn't just built on stolen money, it was built on stolen people. I went home with a pit in my stomach. The image of Grace smiling with her mouth but not her eyes haunted me all night. The next morning I walked into my lawyer's office before he finished his first cup of coffee. Thomas Myers was 2 years ahead of me in law school, before switching paths to become a private practice litigator in San Francisco. We weren't close back then, but he'd always been sharp and disillusioned enough to be useful. He greeted me with a raised eyebrow, Noah Ellison in a suit. "What are we avenging today?" I told him everything. The stolen card, the wedding money, the manipulation, and then the memory of Logan's expulsion scandal and how I was coerced to cover it. Thomas leaned back, chewing the inside of his cheek. "That's fraud, at least. Potential identity theft. Could be mail fraud too, depending on how they process the payment. You have access to the transaction receipts." I forwarded him the bank screenshots. He glanced through them, then froze. "This routing number doesn't go to the wedding venue. It's a pass-through account. Belongs to a shell company in Delaware. Registered under CTE Holdings, CTE, Clara Therese Ellison. That's not a venue deposit. That's a laundering pass." Thomas looked at me. "You got more in this mess than you thought." We started digging. He filed a request with the state registrar, pulled ownership records, financial trails, tax irregularities. In 2 hours, we found 5 LLCs linked back to Clara. 3 were dormant. 1 operated as a family consulting firm. The 5th Caraway Finance Group had a paper trail that reeked of loan sharking. They issued personal loans under the guise of consulting advances. Interest rates were buried in vague language. Collection tactics included legal threats signed by fictitious attorneys. "You said your mom was crying when you confronted her," Thomas asked. "Yeah, she said I was ungrateful." He shook his head. "Noah, she's running a private lending operation. Probably to cover family expenses, maybe hush money. That 75 grand didn't go to florists and catering. It went to prop up whatever facade they're barely keeping upright." I leaned back in the office chair, the leather creaking. "So my parents are broke." He nodded slowly. "Or close to it, and willing to burn your name to buy more time." It wasn't just about refusing to pay. This was theft layered in betrayal wrapped in sins. Thomas snapped a file closed. "We go public with this, it won't just ruin their reputation. It could open civil suits, federal investigation if the IRS gets involved." "You sure you want to detonate that bomb?" I didn't answer right away, because part of me still remembered Sunday pancakes and backyard birthdays. The other part remembered Clara calling me heartless while stealing from me. I stood up. "I want everything documented, every dollar, every lie, every thread that connects their empire to my name." Thomas nodded. "Then let's pull the thread, see how fast it unravels." That afternoon, I went home and opened the dusty safe my parents had gifted me years ago. Inside were old deeds, birth certificates, tax returns, forgotten things they assumed I'd never read. I read everything. It was all there. Transfers disguised as gifts, trusts rewritten without consent, even a power of attorney form that I had no memory of signing. I sat on the floor of my living room for hours, surrounded by decades of orchestrated control. The Ellison name had always been spotless, because every blemish had been scrubbed with someone else's sacrifice. Not anymore. The next morning, Thomas called. "We found another loan, co-signed by you, 10 years ago, used to buy out a silent partner in a vineyard. You ever sign anything like that?" "No." He sighed. "Then your signature was forged. That's a felony." I opened the scanned file he sent. My name, my fake initials, my forged agreement. My hands curled into fists. This wasn't a family. This was a heist disguised as a bloodline. The whispers started 3 days after I dug through the safe. Helen Rivers was the kind of neighbor who knew everything about everyone, even the things they hadn't done yet. She ran a lifestyle blog that masqueraded as recipe reviews and garden tips, but really served as a gossip digest for the entire Napa Valley suburbia. It started with a blog post titled "Broken Vows in Vineyard Shadows." Nothing concrete, nothing accusatory, just vague enough to spark speculation and pointed enough to aim directly at our family. She wrote about a prestigious wedding that had suddenly hit financial bumps, about a bride who wasn't smiling when she thought no one was watching, about a former friend turned whistleblower, and about money that may not have been given but taken. She didn't mention names. She didn't have to. Within 24 hours, the post had been cross-posted to 3 different Facebook groups and a local Reddit thread titled "Napa Wedding Scandals." I watched it spread like rot under polished floorboards. The comments were brutal. "This reeks of old money desperation. Who TF uses their kid's card to fund another kid's wedding? Sounds like that bride needs a lawyer, not a florist." My phone blew up. College friends, old co-workers. Even my assistant Jenna texted me linking the post with a single question mark. Then came the reporters, lifestyle magazines, 2 mid-tier YouTube drama channels. I hadn't said a word publicly, but Clara had. She started visiting the neighbors, showing up with baked goods and sad smiles. She painted me as ungrateful, vindictive, unstable. Said I'd always resented Logan, that I was trying to sabotage his future because I couldn't build my own. Charles said nothing, as always. But Logan followed me on Instagram again. A silent threat or a peace offering, I couldn't tell. I sat on my porch scrolling through the Reddit thread. Someone had posted screenshots of a LinkedIn update Grace had made months ago announcing her engagement. The comments below were brutal. "She used to be so independent. This is sad. Poor girl. Looks like a merger, not a marriage." I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. Thomas called me that evening. "They're panicking. Clara just filed paperwork to dissolve Caraway Finance, and she tried to move funds out of one of the dormant LLCs. IRS flagged it. Good. Also, Helen Rivers reached out to me. She wants to talk to you. Off the record, says she has receipts. What kind emails? Voicemails? Maybe some bank data. Her cousin worked for one of Clara's shell companies 2 years ago." I rubbed my eyes. "Tell her I'll meet her tomorrow. Quiet place." "Okay, but be ready. If she leaks this, it's going to get national. I'm already buried in the fallout. Might as well light the rest on fire." I closed the blinds, sat in the dark. The story was out there now. No matter how much Clara tried to paint me as the villain, people were starting to see through the cracks. And cracks don't disappear. They spread. By the following morning, our family name had become shorthand for dysfunction. It wasn't just gossip anymore. Former vendors of my parents' businesses started backing out of silent contracts. One emailed me directly to say they wouldn't be associating with Ellison interests until the accusations were cleared. I met Helen Rivers at a quiet cafe tucked behind a nursery. She wore sunglasses indoors and ordered her coffee with almond milk and no foam, like she wanted to stay on brand. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, sitting down across from me. "I figured you had a reason." She slid a flash drive across the table. On it were audio files, PDF exports of bank statements, even WhatsApp screenshots. Her cousin had worked as a receptionist for Caraway Finance and had quietly archived anything that seemed off. Clara, it turned out, wasn't just pulling cash from my identity. She was leveraging the Ellison name to promise interest-free loans to friends of friends, pulling fees on the back end while dressing it all up as generosity. I scanned through one of the voice recordings. Clara's voice bright and sugary. Of course it's under Noah's umbrella. He's our financial visionary. Think of it as a family seed fund. I had to pause the recording. My jaw locked so tight it ached. You planning to publish this? I asked Helen. Eventually. But not before I give you a chance to respond. Or act. Why tell me first? Because you're not the villain here. And the people deserve to know when they're being lied to by people who pretend to be clean. I left the cafe with the flash drive in my pocket and a fresh kind of rage in my chest. It was one thing to be stolen from. It was another to be repackaged as a co-conspirator. That night I called Thomas. We go to court. He didn't hesitate. The next few days were a flurry of filings and interviews. We issued a cease and desist to Clara, began paperwork for a full audit, logged every unauthorized financial transaction. I reached out to former clients listed in the Caraway files. Several agreed to provide sworn statements. The story wasn't just spreading, it was catching fire. Grace texted me just once. I saw. I'm sorry. I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted the thread. Let them burn the masks they wore. I was done pretending this was a misunderstanding. It was war. It started with a draft, a quiet post written at 3:14 a.m. under the alias EM. I uploaded it to a legal advice forum where anonymity was respected and real lawyers actually lurked. The title was Cold Factual, Financial Abuse Within Families. How do you fight back when your last name is the weapon? I clicked submit and closed the browser. By morning, a junior attorney in San Francisco reposted it on his Twitter. By noon, it had over 5,000 shares. The Reddit thread came next. Raw legal advice and RR family drama exploded. Screenshots were pulled, reposted, dissected. I watched it all unfold like an oil spill catching fire. Someone connected the dots, cross-referenced the shell companies, pulled tax records, tracked wedding planning vendors, and identified them as linked to Caraway Finance. The narrative built itself, the stolen identity, the coerced engagement, the weaponized silence. By day 3, Facebook exploded. A parenting group in Sacramento reposted it with the caption, "When protecting your son means destroying your daughter." That hit harder than I expected. Then Logan's investors pulled out. Thomas forwarded me an internal email. It read, "In light of recent public discourse involving the Ellison family's financial misconduct, we are suspending all investment activity tied to Logan Ellison effective immediately." Logan called me. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. "You need to stop this. You don't understand what you're doing. You're ruining lives, Evelyn, your own included." I deleted it without listening to the end. Grace texted next. "Can we talk? Please, just us." We met at a cafe near Silverado Trail. She looked like she hadn't slept. No makeup, hair pulled back, a different woman from the polished engagement photos. "I didn't know," she said, "about the money, about the identity stuff." "But you knew enough to stay silent," I replied. She looked down at her hands. "My parents pressured me. Logan told them marrying into your family meant long-term security, that your name meant something, that Charles would make sure I'd never have to worry. I thought he loved me, but now I think he just wanted my silence." "Are you still marrying him?" "No. Not after this." I called it off last night. I believed her. Grace had always been many things, but never cruel. "What are you going to do now?" I asked. "Start over? And maybe tell my story too. People deserve to know I wasn't part of this." Back home, I opened my inbox. Dozens of messages, former Caraway clients, former friends of my parents. A woman named Linda sent me an old invoice with my name forged on it from 3 years ago. She'd lost over $12,000. I added it to the case file. The wedding was officially canceled that Friday. A small line in a society magazine confirmed it. The Ellison-Taylor union will no longer proceed, no reason given. But everyone knew. Helen's next blog post came with the simple title, "The Truth Always Leaks." It went viral. In under 2 hours. Charles didn't speak. Clara went off social media. The world was talking, and for once I didn't feel like I had to defend myself. I didn't have to scream to be heard. They did that for me, and it was just the beginning. Thomas filed the suit on a Thursday morning. A thick stack of documents, witness statements, transaction trails, and digital evidence. Everything we had. He didn't hesitate. I didn't flinch. We filed under financial fraud, identity theft, and misappropriation of funds. The suit named both Clara and Charles as primary defendants with Caraway Finance, and 3 of the LLCs listed as entities under investigation. It wasn't about money anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. This was about truth, about reclaiming whatever dignity they'd tried to bury under their empire of appearances. When the news broke, local media picked it up within hours. Evelyn Ellison sues parents for financial misconduct. It was on the evening broadcast. My face wasn't shown, but the story was unmistakably mine. The next day, my father's attorney contacted Thomas. An offer to settle, confidentially, quietly, no admission of wrongdoing. I laughed when Thomas read me the email. "They still think this is about reputation," I said. "They always have." The Ellison house turned into a bunker. Charles stopped showing up to board meetings. Clara canceled every social appearance. Their silence wasn't strategic. It was fear. But I didn't stop. I contacted every person who had reached out since the forum post, verified their documents, logged their stories. Some were small, a forged signature here, a missing refund there. Others were worse. Loans taken in their names, IRS letters, calls from debt collectors. My parents weren't just careless, they were calculated. They had turned generosity into a front machine to feed their prestige. I met with Thomas again at his office in Oakland. The room smelled like old paper and coffee. He looked up from a file. "You're ready for this?" I nodded. "I don't want an apology. I want them exposed." He slid a folder across the desk. "Discovery demands, subpoenas, a timeline." It felt like loading ammunition. Public reaction was divided. Some still saw me as a bitter daughter out for revenge. Others, many more, saw themselves in me. Children who had been used, silenced, erased. Reddit had a pinned thread collecting updates on the case. Helen's blog became a weekly column now syndicated by a national news blog. One headline read, "When Blood Ties Strangle." My mailbox filled with letters, handwritten ones. One was from a woman in Vermont who wrote, "Thank you for not staying quiet. I showed your story to my daughter. Now she knows she's not alone." Grace reached out again. She wanted to testify. She had emails, voice messages, even a bank transfer receipt Charles had sent to her father labeled Family Alliance. "Letter," I told Thomas. "We're not just showing what they did to me. We're showing a pattern." One evening as I walked home from the grocery store, I passed the church where Logan and Grace were supposed to be married. The banner out front had already been replaced. A different couple's names. A new beginning. I stood there for a minute wondering how many other lives had rotated around that building, believing in beginnings that never truly began. Back at my apartment, I lit a candle. Not for peace, but for clarity. My family had always taught me to keep things neat, silent, invisible. But I had learned that justice was messy, and this time I wasn't cleaning up after them. The first time we met again in person, she brought coffee. Not from a chain, but from a small roaster in Berkeley we used to visit during undergrad. It was the kind of gesture you didn't make unless you remembered. We sat at a picnic table in a quiet park, the kind with too many squirrels and not enough shade. Grace wore jeans, sneakers, a hoodie far too big for her small frame. No jewelry, no Ellison-touched polish. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, her hands curled around the cup like it was armor. I didn't respond right away. I waited. She exhaled. "I should have said something earlier. I should have defended you." I looked down at my own coffee. Black, cooling too fast. "Why didn't you?" She hesitated. "Because I was scared. Your family made promises. To mine. To me. They made it sound like love was just a bonus, not the foundation." "And did you love him?" She flinched. "I thought I could. I thought it would grow. But Logan, he only ever looked at me like I was another asset, not a partner, not even a person sometimes." I nodded. "That sounds familiar." She looked at me, eyes glassy. "They told me you were unstable, bitter, jealous of Logan's success, that you'd tried to ruin things before. I wanted to believe that wasn't true, but they made it hard not to. They're very good at shaping the truth," I said. She pulled out her phone. "I've been going through everything, emails, texts, voice memos. My dad kept records too. I think he had doubts early on. I want to help, not just legally, but really help. You don't owe me anything, Grace. I do. You stood alone. You lost everything, and now I know what that feels like." For the next hour, we sat and sifted through screenshots. Names, dates, transfers. Grace had been closer to the fire than I realized, and now she wanted to be part of putting it out. At one point, she paused. "You remember freshman year?" "Of course," I said. "You were the only person who helped me when I got that rejection from the writing program. Everyone else just smiled and said it was for the best. You deserved better. Still do." She smiled, weak but real. "We didn't talk about romance. There was no need. This wasn't about fixing something that had never really begun. It was about stitching something back together. Friendship. Trust. Two women walking away from fire, not toward it." That night, she sent me a folder labeled "For Trial." Inside were PDFs, audio files, even a photo of a handwritten note from Clara to Grace's mother referencing Evelyn's credit line. Thomas was stunned. This could accelerate everything. "Let it," I said. "Let them feel the collapse." We added Grace as a cooperating witness. That weekend, I took her to the coast. No cameras, no statements. Just two old friends on a shoreline we used to imagine escaping to. The tide was high, the fog low. I skipped a stone. She missed. We laughed. It wasn't peace, but it was a beginning. And beginnings, I had learned, could be just as powerful as endings. It arrived on a Tuesday, cream envelope, heavy paper, my name written in the cursive I knew too well. Clara's handwriting. The return address was still their house, though I wondered if they were even there anymore. I didn't open it at first. I let it sit on the counter unopened while I brewed tea, watered the plants, took 2 calls from Thomas, and ignored 3 from numbers I didn't recognize. That night I lit a candle, not out of ritual, just to fill the silence. I opened the letter. It wasn't long, a page and a half. No dramatic overture, no tears stained the page. Clara wrote that she was sorry, that she never wanted things to end this way, that family, despite its fractures, still mattered. She said they were stepping back from all family-controlled trusts and assets, relinquishing legal guardianship over any remaining business matters involving my name. They hoped this gesture would restore peace, if not relationship. Charles didn't sign it. There was no mention of Logan. I folded the letter back and placed it inside a drawer. Then I sat down at my laptop and drafted my reply. It took 2 sentences. I acknowledge receipt of your letter. I respectfully decline any continued financial entanglement with the Ellison family. I sent it via certified mail. That was the last thread. The next day, I called the estate lawyer, told him to remove my name from any shared property records. I signed away access to the beach house, the vineyard, the vacation home in Tahoe. All of it. Thomas raised an eyebrow. You sure about this? Completely. Walking away doesn't mean losing. It means knowing which battles are worth your breath. I wasn't built to inherit their empire. I was built to burn it down. That weekend, I boxed up the few items I had from their home. Photos, old letters, a silver bracelet Clara gave me on my 15th birthday. I didn't throw them away. I donated them to a women's shelter thrift store. Someone else could find meaning in what meant nothing to me now. Grace helped me carry the boxes. We didn't speak much. She knew what this meant. Closure doesn't always look like a door slamming shut. Sometimes it's just silence after years of noise. We drove back along the freeway with the windows down. Somewhere near Vallejo, I felt lighter. Later that week, I visited the courthouse alone. I stood outside for a long time, just staring at the stone facade, watching strangers come and go with their folders and anxiety. I wasn't one of them anymore. I had traded that fear for resolve. Inside, I filed a notarized statement declaring that I was severing all fiduciary ties to the Ellison Trust. The clerk glanced up at me, puzzled, as if trying to decipher what would make a daughter to that step. They never had to live under that roof, I thought. They never had to trade silence for survival. Thomas emailed that evening. The final confirmation from the registrar had come through. I was no longer legally attached to any Ellison-held entity. It was done. I poured myself a glass of wine, just one, sat on the floor of my living room with a blanket wrapped around my legs. For the first time in a decade, I allowed myself to breathe without calculation. Not every breath had to carry strategy. Some were just meant to keep you alive. Grace called me late. No small talk, just one sentence. You did it. Yeah, I did. There was quiet for a beat. I don't think I've ever met someone who cut cleaner than you. You didn't just leave. You erased their access. That's the only way it sticks. The next morning, a news headline popped up on my phone: Ellison family assets under independent review after daughter's legal move. I didn't click it. I already knew the details. I had written them myself. Instead, I opened my calendar and blocked off a week in September. A solo trip. No itinerary. Just me. A new state, maybe Montana. Somewhere with mountains and silence. Because silence wasn't scary anymore. It was earned. It wasn't over yet. The court case was still ongoing. The depositions would start soon. But for the first time, I felt like I wasn't waiting for anyone's permission to feel free. The Ellison name no longer held me, and without their grip, I could finally decide what my future looked like. On my terms. The apartment in San Diego was smaller than I expected, but the light made up for it. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a balcony just wide enough for a chair and a potted plant, and the quiet hum of a neighborhood that wasn't bracing for war. I unpacked slowly. There was no rush now. The new job started on a Monday. An international law firm headquartered downtown. Sleek office minimalist design, a view of the bay from the 22nd floor. My supervisor was a woman named Linda Cho. Direct, empathetic, and fiercely competent. The kind of leader who didn't flinch at complications. We got along immediately. My first week was a blur of orientations, onboarding meetings, and navigating the subtle etiquette of a firm that dealt with international human rights cases. I didn't have to explain who I was. My past didn't follow me here, not visibly anyway. By the second Friday, I had settled into a rhythm. Mornings started early with black coffee and legal briefs. Afternoons were a flurry of strategy sessions. Evenings were mine. One evening, I received an invitation to a legal symposium hosted at the University of California, San Diego. The keynote speaker was a UN Special Rapporteur on Transitional Justice, the kind of talk I once dreamed of attending back in law school before things unraveled. I RSVP'd. The night of the event, the auditorium was packed. Lawyers, academics, students scribbling notes with furious intent. I sat toward the back near the exit, sipping lukewarm wine from a plastic cup during the reception. That's when I saw her. Grace. She stood near the refreshments table, dressed in a navy blouse and black slacks, hair pinned up, talking to a professor I vaguely recognized. Her smile was different, less curated, more tired. She saw me before I could decide what to do. She walked over slowly. No grand gestures. "Hi." "Hey, I thought you might be here," she said, eyes flicking to my name badge. "Evelyn Monroe." I hadn't changed it yet on paper, but soon. We made small talk. She had moved to Santa Monica for a postgrad fellowship in conflict resolution. The wedding fallout had upended more than her relationship with Logan. Her parents were still angry, but her therapist said that was progress. We sat outside on a concrete bench under a flickering street lamp. She confessed she had been reading everything I published online under the EM initials. I told her I had read the short essay she'd written in a legal blog about coercion in elite marriages. "You're not hiding anymore," I said. "Neither are you." The silence between us was less awkward than I feared. It had always been complicated even back then, but now the tension had softened into something more fragile, more forgiving. "I don't know what we are," I said. "You don't have to name it. Sometimes it's just enough to not be alone in the room." She left early. We didn't make plans, but I knew we'd see each other again. That weekend I explored Balboa Park, just wandered. No destination, no timeline. At a botanical garden, I stood beneath a canopy of ferns and closed my eyes. The wind smelled like eucalyptus and possibility. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. Every night I walked home without checking my phone for missed calls. I cooked dinner with the radio on. I slept through the night without dreams of courtroom depositions or childhood Christmas mornings gone wrong. Freedom, I realized, wasn't loud. It was quiet, predictable, gentle. And for me, it was finally real. The postcard came in a plain white envelope. No return address, just a San Diego postmark. Inside was a single image of a rocky coastline and the words, "Thinking of you," printed in blocky type. I turned it over. The handwriting was unmistakable. "Clara." It was short, a sentence, maybe two. "Hoping you're well. We miss you." No apology, no plea, just a ghost of what once was fluttering in through my mailbox. I didn't reply. Instead, I walked to the beach. It was just past 5 and the sun was curling down into the ocean like a slow exhale. I brought my headphones and a handheld recorder. For weeks I'd been thinking about starting a podcast, not for followers, just as a way to give shape to the things I had survived. I pressed record. My name is Evelyn Monroe. For a long time I believed family was something fixed, something unchangeable even when it hurt you. I paused, listening to the waves, but sometimes family is who you survive despite. And sometimes it's who you find when the noise settles. I talked for 20 minutes. About Logan, about the wedding, about stolen money and the silence that follows betrayal, about the loneliness of choosing yourself when everyone else demands your compliance. I talked about Grace, about Thomas, about the people who had helped me hold the line, who didn't ask me to be quieter, smaller, more obedient. When I stopped recording, it was dark. The beach had emptied out. My fingers were cold, but my chest felt light. I uploaded the file that night, named it Episode 1, The Cost of Silence. Didn't share it yet, just saved it. The next morning I woke up to sunlight and a text from Grace. Just checking in. Let's grab coffee soon. Yes, let's. I had a new routine now, one not defined by expectation or fear. I biked to work some days, took long walks at lunch, read poetry again. I stopped counting the losses, started counting the quiet victories, sleeping in on Sundays, laughing mid-sentence, not flinching when my phone rang. Clara sent one more letter. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Whatever she wanted to say, she could keep it. I had said enough. Some people think closure is a conversation, but I've learned it's a decision. To let go, to live forward. My podcast slowly found listeners, survivors, women, people who had been broken open by the weight of family and learned to walk upright anyway. They wrote to me, "Thank you for saying it out loud. Thank you for not making it sound easy." I recorded every week, not because I had all the answers, but because for the first time I didn't feel like I was drowning in someone else's story. This one was mine. And if you're listening right now, wherever you are, maybe you've been there too. Maybe you're there now. Here's what I'll leave you with. Blood doesn't make a family. Love does, choice does, and you too can choose. Have you ever had to choose your family? I'd love to hear your story. Subscribe if this found you in a quiet place. I'll be here again next week. Until then, take care. This is Evelyn, and I'm finally home.